Star Wars, best place for below average Star Wars.
Hello there, and welcome to the Star Wars Show, a UK-based Star Wars podcast with in-depth discussions and analysis sprinkled with some silliness. I am the Geordie Jedi Pete.
And I am Jason Hondo Ling.
And it is me and Jason in the cockpit today, bringing you the latest Star Wars news. Jason, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad, Pete. Pretty good.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. Let's just kick things off, and this was a surprise to me. So, Rory McCann, who of course we do all know has been he is the recast Baylan Skoll in the upcoming season 2 of Star Wars Ahsoka, replacing of course the legendary Ray Stevenson, who sadly passed away. He almost joined the Star Wars universe in Andor, so this news broke this week. Two very awesome dudes, the Star Wars Sessions lads, Matt Hudson and Luke Bly, they were speaking to Joplin Sibtain about how his role as Brasso in the Andor Disney Plus series and sort of how it was originally cast to Rory McCann. That was until the Game of Thrones actor injured himself. And this is what was said. He just had a limp and he went to work. They did a scan on it and the consultant said if you don't have this operated on, you're going to not be able to walk. So since McCann couldn't continue, Sibtain was offered the chance to read for the role of Brasso. They reshot it. They did a lot of work with the Hound's face. They had to superimpose my face on him, he explained. Obviously, I think it goes to show that, because I remember when we were talking about sort of recasting, and then Rory McCann sort of came out of Norway and was announced as like he's going to be Baylan Skoll, but as we can see here, sort of Lucasfilm and Disney have been wanting to work with this actor for a while and actually were working with him until an injury stopped that from happening. And then, fate has had its way and put him back into the Star Wars universe. I don't know if you've seen this story, Jace, but sort of what's your thoughts on it, how things come full circle?
Yeah, no, I saw this and it was an interesting story. And especially, I was quite gutted because the event that the guys were interviewing him at was actually one that I wanted to go to. So it was actually, I was a little bit jealous that I wasn't able to be there. But no, it's an interesting thing that, as you say, obviously Rory McCann has been on Lucasfilm's radar for a while. And I think it's quite exciting that he's stepping into this role, and it's kind of funny that he's stepping into a role after someone stepped into the role that he was supposed to play. But it's great. He is a great actor. The stuff that he's done, his body of work, speaks for itself. And I think he's going to carry on the mantle that Ray Stevenson left with a great deal of dignity towards what Ray had already done. And obviously, the fact that Joplin got to then step into the role himself. And let's face it, for me, Brasso was one of my favourite characters in the Andor series. So I'm glad he got to play that part. And as much as I like Rory McCann, it's a bit different. I sort of can't see him as the character. So it's a very interesting story. And yeah, as I say, it came out of an event that happened in Surrey that I think next year I might have to try and go to, because they had a lot of actors from Andor there. So if they do similar sort of thing next year, be interesting to get along to.
It certainly will. I think, I mean, Brasso's so integral in season 1 of getting Cassian like through a lot of his traumas, so to speak. I think he's there as like as a friend, as somebody who's going to push Cassian in the right direction, somebody who also holds Cassian accountable, I think, for his actions, and is certainly sort of a kickstand and keeps Cassian up when maybe Cassian like can't hold himself up anymore. And then in season 2, obviously, his fate's sort of integral to pushing Cassian further towards becoming this integral part of the Rebel Alliance. And to think of it as, I think Rory McCann would have, I think Brasso would have been more gritty and maybe a bit more sort of like grizzled. Where I feel the Brasso we got was tough, but was also sort of, had a lot of care in him as well. And I don't know how well Rory McCann would have portrayed that, but it would have been different, is what I can say. But I think this has probably worked out brilliantly for everyone because obviously we got a brilliant Brasso. We're hopefully going to get a brilliant recast of Bane Skull. And I think since Rory McCann was announced as the new Bane Skull, I haven't seen anybody sort of discuss that like he shouldn't be. And I think, it's allowing us to sort of to get the best Bane Skull we can because Ray Stevenson obviously sadly isn't available to do that and be able to continue that Ahsoka story. And I think it's going to be really good. And I think he's going to do a really good job. So things come full circle. Star Wars like poetry, it rhymes, as George Lucas said, and here we go. We see it right there. Moving on to another Star Wars series, that is Star Wars Skeleton Crew. So John Watts has been talking, basically getting John Watts' debut, which is called, his debut feature was called Clown. So I think it's getting a re-release sort of a decade later. And he was talking about that, and then he was also talking about Marvel. Obviously, he is behind the new Spider-Man movies, although he's not directing the newest one, which comes out next year. And obviously, he was, showrunner on Skeleton Crew. And sort of, he talked a lot about, they've talked about some of the production aspects. He said, the fully storyboarded and created animatics for every episode. He did all the voices. We have an additional step where the directors took it into a motion capture stage and did a 3D previs till it reblocked the scene. We were able to watch that back and give notes. It really allows you to be as interactive as you would be if it was an animated film. You're giving notes on pacing and shot framing and even lighting. It gives you a couple of opportunities to get it as right as you possibly can. It's fun. I think all the directors really enjoyed that process too. It's a luxury. It's something that we got to get because it was Star Wars. It's nice to have a little wiggle room to try stuff out. That led to the question, do you expect to make more Skeleton Crew? And what he said was, I mean, I love Star Wars. I would love to do anything in the Star Wars universe. And I think we set it up in a way where the story can continue in a lot of interesting ways. So he's pretty coy about whether he's coming back to do Star Wars, but I love his enthusiasm for sort of, going back and sort of storyboarding things out, and creating animatics to sort of go through every episode. And the fact I did that for every episode, not just key sequences, just shows how much sort of time, effort, and craft sort of went into the series, which is fantastic. And then I love that he's sort of, saying that he's saying everything that we already know, right? We know Skeleton Crew is set up in a way where it finished and the story can continue a lot of interesting ways. I think it probably ties into the Mandoverse and somebody else deals with it. But what's your thoughts? Are we getting a Skeleton Crew too, or are we going to have that story tied up somewhere else?
I'm really not sure. I think at the moment the way everything's going, they're holding back on the television side of things. So I think they're playing a bit of a waiting game, which is possibly sensible, in that they know they've got Mandalorian and Grogu coming out, so they've got the film side covered in there. They've got Starfighter in production. They've got Ahsoka in pre-production, ready to come out following the Mandalorian and Grogu. So I think it's possibly because of I think they're taking it slower. So I think if it does happen, they'll be waiting to see what happens with the other shows, how successful they are. but they know that they've got this show that they could do. The only issue they've got there is the kids are growing up fast, and obviously, although they could quite easily do a time jump. The kids are slightly older, blah blah blah, or they could take it. So there's so many different aspects. But I think at the moment it's probably one that's just sat there on the back burner. I think it's safe to say that Skeleton Crew wasn't was met with quite a lot of affection from Star Wars fandom. No matter how everyone thought about it coming into it, I think it's something that sits quite comfortably in Star Wars. So I think there's definitely room for it to expand. But obviously that could happen. We could see comic books coming out. We could see novelizations. There's so much expansion that can be done with Star Wars at the moment. So yeah, I'd love to see more of the storytelling of the Skeleton Crew and see it expanded, because I think it was really interesting what they did there, and I can only keep my fingers crossed.
Definitely. And my thoughts, if we can get more Jude Law in Star Wars, let's do it. And I think such an intriguing character at the end there, where he's obviously knows the Force, he knows the ways of the Jedi, but clearly not a Jedi any longer, but just likes gold. Where does that go? Who knows? And I think the other side of it is, that sort of secret planet and society that was hidden from the galaxy as we know it, that, was existing as if the Republic never fell, and none of the events of the original trilogy happened, and none of the events of sort of, going into past the original trilogy into sort of the aftermath trilogy of books and, Lost Stars and the events that lead up to the Force Awakens, again, sort of that's the time frame is where we come out at. And, this sort of group of people on this planet, know none of that, which is pretty intriguing. Obviously, Star Wars Skeleton Crew is still on Disney Plus, so you can stream that whenever you like. Moving on to that, speaking of Disney Plus, and obviously we have had the Walt Disney Company did have its quarterly meeting, shareholder call. Disney Plus streaming subscribers, it rose by 3.8 million in the last quarter, so it's very good news. So it rose by 3.8 million to 131.6 million subscribers in quarter four, ending September 2024. Although obviously we all know spending on the service is going to decrease by 1 billion over the next year. We know that Marvel shows were making less of them. Star Wars shows were making less than we were other things. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to spend less. I think, make good product. Don't make loads of product and only some of it be good, is what I would say. But yes, Disney released its latest quarterly earnings early Thursday morning last week, reporting revenues of 22.5 billion, essentially flat from last year, and segment operating income of 3.5 billion, down 5% from a year ago. While Disney is still feeling the pinch of linear TV's troubles, its streaming business continues to grow. Most notably, the company beat Wall Street estimates, with Disney Plus subscribers rising, as I've just said, 3.8 million. That's compared to quarter three. And then obviously Disney Plus and Hulu subscribers raising by 12.4 million as well. Direct-to-consumer revenue rose by 8% in the quarter to 6.2 billion, with operating income rising by 39% to 352 million. Those subscriber numbers are still somewhat surprising, given that Disney had two events in the quarter that could impact subscribers: the short-lived suspension of Jimmy Kimmel and the announcement of price increases. So obviously when this Jimmy Kimmel was suspended, there was a lot of boycott going on and things like that. And then obviously announcement of price increases does tend to have people maybe freeze their subscriptions, but they still rose despite that, which I think is a very good sign. I think it's a good thing that Disney Plus subscribers are rising. I think the more money that's in Disney Plus means we get more shows. Sadly, that doesn't mean necessarily more Star Wars. I don't think it means, generally there's more budget there to invest and we'll get little bits of everything. I think we've been very fortunate with the amount of Star Wars we've got since Disney Plus started, and I think all the streaming platforms have sort of learned over the past couple of years that you can make too much content to where your subscriber base isn't going to go up too much, but you're spending millions and millions on productions, and sort of you're not going to claim that back because you've already got your subscribers. If that makes sense, they're already there, they've already paid. What's your thoughts? Pleased to see that Disney Plus is increasing, and sort of, it's good to see that it is in a good place. I think, like I said, I don't think we're going to get any extra Star Wars series, but I think it means going past Ahsoka season 2. I think we will get some things.
Yeah, I think obviously, Disney Plus has been going through a sort of it's like its childhood stage, so it's had to establish itself and find its footing, and I think it's started to find that. Obviously, Disney are in a really, really strong position now, stronger than when they launched Disney Plus, because obviously since they launched it, they've acquired Fox, and the back catalogue. To straight away they've got more films that they were able to put out. Then they've also gained a lot of the Fox television series, which, in America, a lot of those are still involved with the different channels. Over in here in the UK, that's been great because we've now got all these sort of programs in the one place, and you can sort of watch them without. Previously, we'd have had the issues of the networks used to put them on, and then you get breaks and that. Whereas now they come on to Disney Plus quite nicely. So I think it's in a really good footing. And talking from a UK perspective, I've tried the different streaming platforms, and Disney Plus is my favourite. Partly because obviously it's got Star Wars, and also I enjoy the Marvel content. So, they've got two IPs there that they can keep churning stuff out. But I think they've done the right thing by pulling back and not putting out so much, because you can oversaturate stuff. And Star Wars fans especially, we'd rather have good quality stuff, wait a while for it to come out than just be hit with loads of stuff. So, yeah, I think that Disney Plus is certainly in a position that I think it will grow with strength, as long as they're sensible. So, you know, and I'm sure there's going to be more Star Wars content coming out over time. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how it keeps growing.
Indeed. And tying in with the earnings call, there was a banner flown over the Walt Disney Company's Burbank-based headquarters at 11 a.m. on November 13th, just hours after the company had its earnings call, that clearly said shareholders want the hunt for Ben Solo. So these protests are still ongoing. Fans continue to let the powers at force at Disney Lucasfilm know that they want the cancelled sequel film, The Hunt for Ben Solo, to be resurrected and brought to the big screen. This is one of those stories that just won't go away. We thought it had sort of died off, and then this happened. We know there's a script and screenplay there finished. We know that sort of the Lucasfilm were happy with it. They took it to Bob Iger and the Walt Disney Company, and they sort of didn't send the script away with it being bad and didn't leave notes or rewrites. They were just simply saying that they didn't want to have a Ben Solo movie, basically. This continues to sort of pepper on in the background, you could say, I suppose. It's not like huge, but like just when you thought it was away, like this happens. And I think, Adam Driver released that information in that interview when he did a few weeks ago, like very sort of articulately and calculated at the right time. So I think this is just people being silly, or do you think it will lead to us getting the Hunt for Ben Solo in some form?
Yeah, it's one of those things that in an ideal world, I think, yeah, Disney will say, yeah, let's do it. But I'm sure they had their reasons why they didn't move forward with it. and I don't think fan pressure is going to necessarily move that forward. It is quite interesting the amount of people that have been involved in Star Wars that are coming out and saying, "Yeah, this this is really interesting." So it'd be interesting to see how it progresses. As we said at the time when Adam Driver made the comments about it, it was like it was done for a reason. And, there certainly seems to have been a pickup of people going, we want this. So it'd be interesting to see how Disney reacts. I've not seen any comments coming from Disney, so there's been a lot of quietness over this.
It has indeed, and I think the quotes were that Bob Iger and somebody else on executive level simply said that they couldn't see how Ben Solo was alive, which I find absolutely ironic and maybe moronic when you consider that Palpatine just come back out of nowhere to sort of to get them out of a corner with that last movie. So if that's the only reason why you didn't make this movie was because of that, then I think go ahead and make it. You've got a legendary filmmaker, and Steven Soderbergh was wanting to direct it. I think getting the best actor of his generation, Adam Driver, back in Star Wars, why wouldn't you want to do that? And, I'm glad it's still ongoing. I'm glad that we are letting them know what we want this. And I think let's continue to push, and you never know, maybe we will get it. Moving on from that, going back to sort of George Lucas, the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art now has an opening date. It will be September 22nd, 2026. So yes, this is the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art. It is founded by George Lucas and his wife, Melody Hobson, and they have announced it will open to the public on September 22nd, 2026. It is a new cultural institution. It's filled with gardens. It's a history of sort of mythology, modern myth, moving image, story, narrative storytelling. I think I'm selling it short there by saying that. But yeah, this is moving along quite quick. I think we mentioned a few weeks ago about how sort of they've been at comic conventions sort of promoting this. From what I can gather, I think as of maybe a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago, there was sort of a change. Some people left roles at the museum and some more new people came in. And then all of a sudden we've gone full string into sort of marketing this thing in a really, really good way. The Lucas Museum's permanent collection holds more than 40,000 works, representing one of the most significant collections of narrative art. The building's 35 galleries occupy 100,000 square feet. Galleries are named to reflect the human experience, love, family, community, play, work, sports, childhood, adventure, and more. They will display familiar pieces by beloved illustrators, mural paintings of the 20th and 21st centuries, comic art, of which the museum has deep and extensive holdings, children's book illustrations, science fiction illustrations, and the fantastic visions captured in 20th century culture. The museum will also display cinematic artifacts, including movie posters and show documentaries featuring artists and filmmakers, as well as movie props and costumes. We know for a fact that there's going to be a pod racer in there, and we know for a fact that there is going to be a Naboo N1 Starfighter from the Phantom Menace, amongst other things. Obviously, it's far away from us here in England, but it's great to see this museum finally come together and have an opening day. And I think this is George's. After selling the company, this is his next huge project. This is his legacy. He wants to leave it behind for future generations to be able to go here and sort of learn about narrative art and storytelling and how to tell awesome, wonderful stories. What's your thoughts on just how close this is now?
Yeah, for me, it's quite exciting. It's one of those things that when I look at it, it's something that I'd really like to go to the US and see, because I think it's going to be a treasure trove of lots of different things, whether it's art, whether it's movie props, whether it's experiences. So yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see. And obviously, once it's open. I'm sure online there'll be the virtual tours, and all the influencers will be going there to do their videos and that. So we'll see what George has created, and I think that's just going to tempt us all a little bit more to try and make a trip. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more of what George has achieved there.
Definitely. I think what he says that the Lucas Museum seeks to explore how stories connect people and capture the human experience. Stories are mythology, and when illustrated, they help humans understand the mysteries of life, said George Lucas, co-founder of the museum. The museum was built on the belief that illustrated storytelling is a universal language, which I do very much agree with. This is a museum of the people's art. The images are illustrations of beliefs we live with every day. For that reason, this art belongs to everyone, said Lucas Museum co-founder Melody Hobson. Our hope is that as people move through the galleries, they will see themselves and their humanity reflected back. But yes, I think it's going to make. It's obviously based in California, I believe. So once this opens up, it makes wanting to plan a trip there. Certainly for us people in the UK, probably a bit easier because you could do one whole trip, maybe do 3 weeks. You could go to this museum, you could do Disneyland and Galaxy's Edge, and if you're very lucky, you could maybe go and look at the Yoda fountain at the Lucasfilm headquarters. Now, those three things aren't necessarily close together. America is very much a huge, massive land, but you could probably fit that in 3 weeks as well. Some of that areas in the surrounding area. So I think it's a really, really good thing. It's going to make that once-in-a-lifetime trip sort of easier to do because there's more once-in-a-lifetime things in the area. Don't know what your thoughts on that, the fact that this is going to be opening up so, you can buy one plane ticket, but you could box this off along with Disneyland and Galaxy's Edge and maybe Lucasfilm and maybe some other areas as well. Does it make it more
Sounds like
enticing to you, Jason?
Yeah, sounds like the perfect Star Wars road trip.
It does indeed. It does
Yeah.
indeed. But yes, that is the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, and that is opening September 22nd, 2026. Moving on from that, we're going to move on to Star Wars Starfighter. So, obviously, it's in production now, as we know, and as we've spoken about. Matt Smith is to join the production in December, so next month. So, this is pretty cool. And this was Matt Smith was speaking to a Rabbit's Foot, and he shared that he'll be joining the production of Star Wars Starfighter in December, and he's currently getting fitted for his costume. What he said was, we're going through the process of trying to find a costume, and sometimes you don't know if you love a costume until you've worn it for a couple of days. He says, I'm about to do Star Wars in December, and we're sort of trying to develop the look for that, he finishes. Obviously, Star Wars Starfighter is set to land in cinemas on May 28th, 2027. What's your thoughts? Obviously, finally getting Matt Smith in Star Wars. I know another full circle moment, as we mentioned before, about Rory McCann. Matt Smith was announced and was set to be in Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. We don't know what happened with that. It'll come out down the line, but he was obviously nowhere near it. But here he is. He's tried on costumes, and he's set to join the set in December. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I really can't wait. Matt Smith's one of my favourite actors. I, I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, and I loved what he did in that. I felt he was one of my favourite Doctors, even though I felt the stories weren't necessarily great for him, which I felt he was let down at times. But what he gave us was absolutely magical. Obviously, then he's gone on House of Dragons. He can play dark so brilliantly, which is what makes me excited about seeing him as a baddie in Star Wars, because I've seen him in House of Dragons and he can be evil. And then obviously, he's done the historical thing with the first two seasons of the the Crown, and he was, again, he captured this character that we all knew, but it was Matt Smith giving his tribute to Prince Philip, which was quite strange, but he really did put his all into it. So yeah, I think as an actor, he's absolutely brilliant, and I think he'll bring a lot of gravitas. I don't think he'll be your classic sort of, boo and hiss baddie, I think he will bring a character. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to the film once um, they've completed it. So it's exciting times.
It certainly is. And speaking of the film, um, we're going to talk about Shawn Levy's been discussing the movie as well, which we'll talk about. But I just want to say, Matt Smith, I feel that in Doctor Who, even though I think you're right, he was let down a bit by some of sort of the creative decisions, some of the material he had. But I feel he sort of always looked to elevate Doctor Who. And whatever he was given, he was very enthusiastic about and tried to add something to it, which is fantastic. And I feel Matt Smith, although he was young at the time, he really sort of believed in, like, I am Doctor Who, I am the Doctor. I need to give it everything I can because I'm sort of responsible for this important idea. I've got this for this next, 5 years or decade, how long it is, and I need to be responsible for it and care about it and let it flourish. It's something I think current doctors and the past few doctors maybe haven't had that same view on it. In the sticking out for one season and leaving things like that, I think it's a lack of maybe respect and awareness of what Doctor Who actually is. It's more than just a rule. It's a piece of pop culture and it's a piece of people's not just childhoods, but a piece of their psyche and a piece of their humanity. And I think he always understood that and tried to do his best by it. And that's why I'm excited about we've got somebody with that type of mind and that type of responsibility who takes that things on in Star Wars is going to be great. But moving on to the movie itself, whilst promoting the fifth and final season of Stranger Things, Shawn Levy, who was of course the writer-director of the movie Star Wars Starfighter, wanted to discuss all things Star Wars Starfighter. What he said was, well, for one thing, it is different in that it is an all-new, non-sequel, non-prequel adventure. It's new characters, it's a new timeline, it inherits legacy themes, but it's really trying to give Star Wars fans and just movie audiences something fresh, something new, and with a spirit of play and big-hearted adventure with moments of real levity that, frankly, A New Hope did in a revolutionary way. He went on to say, we're really trying to sort of take that tone as a North Star every day. My crew, my DP, Claudio Miranda, Gosling is my kind of central collaborator in the lead role. It's certainly been a dream come true. My 10-year-old self is on set with me every day. In fact, he's going to catch a flight tonight to go back to the set and keep shooting on Monday. But it's a huge and very opportunity because Lucasfilm has been so encouraging of me doing something new. There's no pressure to be derivative or limited by an obligation to what came before. It's just a love of what came before. So yeah, I think not too much to unpack there, but I think it's great to see that. It's funny because although he's saying it's an all new non-sequel, non-prequel, but it does fit in the timeline and it is set after the sequel trilogy, which I think, let's not be silly. I think it's set after that time frame, so it's going to be after the fall of the First Order or the Final Order, and it's going to be sort of seeing what remains of the New Republic and sort of what's happening there. Happening in the galaxy at that time. The movie might not deal with that, but that's what's going to be going on. But I think obviously it doesn't have to stick to characters we've seen or places we've seen before. It can just tell a new story, which I think is cool. But sort of, what's your thoughts on how excited he is about working on it? I love how he feels no pressure or limited by an obligation of what came before, just that he loves what came before, and that's really driving him forward into sort of trying to tell this awesome, fun, and really sort of big-hearted adventure.
Yeah, I think it's great in that allows a director the fact that he's got that freedom to be more creative. One thing that we can all be critical of the directors of, like the sequels, but none of us know the pressure of you're going in to continue a story that is so well established. It's going to hinder creativity. But because the galaxy is so huge, when you're creating a new property within that galaxy, it allows you to move freer, and I think that's what's coming across with Shawn Levy's statements. And yeah, I think that's what partly makes this film quite exciting. You know, when you look at what we've had before, it, you know, even with the Mandalorian, it was different, but it still was linked to the original Skywalker saga. So yeah, I think it's quite exciting times for Star Wars fans and Star Wars storytelling as a whole.
It certainly is. And continuing on with Star Wars movies, obviously the next Star Wars movie is The Mandalorian Grogu, obviously coming next summer. And Sigourney Weaver has revealed the reason why she joined that movie. She was speaking to Empire magazine, and she addressed the real reason why she made the choice to join The Mandalorian Grogu, explaining that it's always the script. She put, yeah, that's my compass. It's always the script. So with The Mandalorian and Grogu, it was not my intention to find a fourth franchise. I didn't ever imagine that I would enter the Star Wars world. But what's interesting about Star Wars now is they're no longer trying to do the Star Wars to end all Star Wars. They're letting that universe exist and telling really interesting stories within that. I think Jon Favreau thought, okay, we want this very strong character. Let's make it a woman. I'm not sure it was supposed to be a woman. I think, again, these days they often think, what do I need to do to make this seem more timely? Now, because women are doing everything, hooray for us. But I just fell in love with the script and said, I don't know anything about this world. John said, well, you can watch the series. And I said, oh, there's a series. So, yeah, I think it's great to hear Sigourney talk about, she wasn't necessarily hunting for Star Wars. Obviously the scripts come across her desk. She's read it. She loved it. She's went it. She's got the role. She sort of went to Jon Favreau, look, I don't know anything about this world. And he said, look, there's a series. You can go watch the series. And she's went, oh, is there? So she wasn't even that aware of it, which is, I think, fantastic. And it proves that she hasn't been sort of button filled in. She's went through a process and wants to do it. But yeah, I think what your thought process on that Sigourney Weaver maybe wasn't just coming because it was Star Wars, she's coming because it's a great script. And I suppose as well, what she's saying here mirrors what Shawn Levy was sort of saying about working on Star Wars Starfighter as well, about how, we're here to tell interesting stories within that Star Wars universe, but we're not trying to do the Star Wars to end all Star Wars.
Yeah, I think the fact that Sigourney Weaver's made these comments is great because obviously we now know she's not just been brought in to be an actor, a face actor taking on a role to fit in so that they've got someone famous in the series or in the film. She's read the script. That's what made her go for it. I think that's real positive. Sigourney Weaver, when you look at the body of work again that she's got, she's done some amazing stuff. And if you look at what she's done recently on Avatar, I don't know if you've seen, there's a new documentary that's actually dropped on Disney Plus about the making of the current two Avatar films. And, I knew that the character that Sigourney Weaver plays in the second film was a younger version, but I didn't realise how much of the on-set work she did and how they then created the character in the computer. It's really interesting watch, but it also goes to show what a great actress she is, that she can, take on this very younger role and portray it so you believe it's a young person and the young person's emotions coming through. So yeah, another great actress added to a great series, great film. And I can't wait to see what she's got to do in the film.
No, indeed, I agree with all of that. And, I don't know if I mentioned the podcast, but in my local cinema, which is at Odeon in the Metro Centre Gateshead, they have The Mandalorian and Grogu poster is up. So I've seen one in the wild, which is fantastic, and I'm excited for Star Wars to be back on the big screen come next summer. Last news story of the episode, or last planned one anyway, is a bit of a sad one. StarWars.com has announced that Star Wars Insider magazine, most recently produced by Titan Publishing Group, will launch its final issue in 2026, ending with issue 237. The official Star Wars magazine first launched under the Insider moniker in 1994, part of an evolution that began with the Lucasfilm Fan Club magazine. But the earliest incarnation of the idea began in 1978 with the start of the official Star Wars Fan Club. A newsletter in the membership kit was renamed Bantha Tracks after a contest in issue 2 and will mark its final edition in March of 1987 with issue 35 covering the new Star Tours ride. The first glossy Lucasfilm Fan Club magazine debuted in the fall that same year, featuring C-3PO and R2-D2 on the cover, with a cake decorated with 10 candles to mark the 10th anniversary of Star Wars A New Hope, as well as Lucasfilm's expansion into new stories beyond the galaxy far, far away. Growing interest in Star Wars just 7 short years later spurred the new name Star Wars Insider, which debuted with the widely coveted premiere issue number 23 in 1994. During its lifetime, the logo would be redesigned, the license would change hands, and many editors and writers would bring their love of Star Wars to those printed pages. Star Wars Insider issue 237 will be the magazine's last with Titan. And the next issue, 235, a celebration of the 10th anniversary of Star Wars The Force Awakens, will arrive on newsstands December 9th. There will also be printings of the hardcover and tribute collections of short fiction, Star Wars High Republic Volume 3, a slipcase set of all 3 High Republic short stories volumes, and a special edition celebrating the 10th anniversary of Rogue One, a Star Wars story next year. So the final two issues of Star Wars Insider will be released in early 2026. Back issues will be available while supplies last. I think a few things from me. I do read Star Wars Insider, something I've started reading properly over the last few months, like getting the new issue when they come out, which is every 2 months, I believe. I think it's bi-fortnightly. And I remember getting the official Star Wars sort of magazine back when I was sort of a teenager. I think what's sad is that it's not a case of it's going. They haven't said it's going online only. It's not changing the times to be like an e-book or an e-magazine or whatever that is, or a TikTok page or whatever that short form media looks like. Looks like it's coming to an end. It's not being recreated anywhere, which I think is a sad. Someone as a millennial. I am a millennial, born in 1989. I like reading books. I like reading magazines. I'd rather have it in my hand rather than, on a website or, I don't have a Kindle. I don't read ebooks. I much prefer it as, physically in my hand where I can pull the pages and read it. And, we're losing something here, which, its history goes way back to 1978, in Star Wars A New Hope. And that is ending at the beginning of next year. What's your thoughts on the news that Star Wars Insider is coming to an end and it's not changing into anything else?
Yeah, obviously, as you say, it's really sad that it's not changing into anything else. Over the years, there's definitely, we know there's a decline in print media and the desire for people to have books and magazines. So it's sort of inevitable that it was going to happen, but it's a shame, and it'll be interesting to see if anything gets announced, that they're going to move forward with something new. But it's sort of the end of an era, and it's one of these things that we're seeing more and more. It's quite funny though, because it also goes to show, like, just on a local sort of basis, we had a local magazine that went similar sort of way. It basically was going to shut. Someone then acquired the rights to set it up digitally, and that's been quite successful. But then someone else then decided to grab the mantle and start republishing it and took it back to print media. And since they've done that, it's become even more popular. So it'll be interesting to see if someone takes hold of it and says, let's do something. Obviously, it's a little bit difficult because obviously Star Wars Insider was closely linked to Lucasfilm, and so if they did you've then got to work with Lucasfilm to be able to get the stories and that. But it's something that I think there'll be a gap that could be filled. But obviously, as we know, there's lots of online content, online reporting. Um, will we see that grow? I'd like to hope so. But it's sad times when you see this sort of thing disappear. But it's the nature of the beast that if the demand's not there for the people to actually purchase it, then they're not going to carry on with it.
Indeed. And I think, not only do we get exclusive interviews, we know with cast and crew, behind the scenes looks at Star Wars, both retrospective looking at Star Wars past, but also interviews about new Star Wars that's coming. As I mentioned in that readout, we got bits of sort of Star Wars fiction in there. Star
Yeah.
Wars stories that are canon that were printed in there as well, which was really cool. It was just a nice all-round Star Wars feast. You got a bit of everything. You got some canon stories, you got some behind-the-scenes look, and you got like a look at what's coming in the future. So we will see what the future holds, and Star Wars Insider will leave a big hole, I think. And I think yes, it's very sad to see it go. Moving on from that, Jace, is there any other Star Wars stories you want to cover that we haven't?
I'm going to mention what you and I have already talked about. I've bit the bullet and I've purchased my ticket for Thank the Maker, which is happening on December the 7th in Fordingbridge in Wiltshire. And there are still tickets available, so I'm gonna give Dave and the guys that are organising it a bit of a shout out, because I went to the Andor event that they hosted during the summer, and that was amazing. And they look like they're pulling the event out of the bag again. This Thank the Maker's journey behind the Star Wars stories to do with the 10th anniversary of The Force Awakens. And they've got the likes of Lee Towersey, who is one of the droid builders and operators from the film, joined by Brian Heron, who was BB-8 performer. So you've got two great technical guys there, who are also going to be joined by Neil Scanlon, who was and still is Mr. Creatures for Star Wars. So it's going to be really interesting there. Jake Lunt Davies returns to talk about the concept design, which I'm looking forward to. And then we've got some of the actors involved or behind the scenes sort of puppeteers. I mustn't forget to mention another droid builder and operator, Oliver Steeples, who's going to be there. Shout out to Ollie there. And so we've also got Katie Coleman, who was one of the performing artists for The Force Awakens, and Kieran Shah, who was the performing artist of Tito. Now, Kieran Shah is someone that, if you know the different films that he's been in over the years, he's done a lot of films as a artist. So he's someone I'm really looking forward to listening to what he's got to say. And to top it all off, it's being moderated by Pablo Hidalgo, which, I met Pablo a couple of years ago up at another event in Fordingbridge. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him and, obviously seeing what he's got to say about The Force Awakens. I'm pretty sure there's more guests going to be announced. There was one I missed. Sorry, there's Martin Brezard, who's another one of the concept artists and sculptor. So there's it's a mix of behind the scenes, and this is something that if you're interested, like I am, the behind the scenes, this is a really great opportunity. So if you're in the south of England in particular, it's quite easy to get to. But it's just an event that I'm excited that I was talking to Dave at the end of the Amor event, and he was saying how he was hoping to organise more of these events. But I was caught off guard that he managed to do another one within 6 months of the first one. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he's done. And I know a lot of the guys that will be working behind the scenes with him, putting in a lot of effort to prepare it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to 3 weekends time and going and finding out about the behind the scenes of the Force Awakens.
And it's great timing for its 10th anniversary. Speaking of stars behind the scenes, this week, so before the end of the week, I'm hoping to bring a very special interview with Brandon Wyanerty, who is, of course, from Talking B94, the Star Wars podcast. He's been on this show a few times, but he is also a Star Wars author now. And his newest book, which is Star Wars Encyclopedia of Starfighters and Other Vehicles, is out now, I believe. So, like I said, I should be interviewing Brandon for this show this week, and that should be coming up in the stream soon. And anybody who lives in America, in particular in Austin, Texas, Brandon is doing a book signing and meet and greet, and that is in the Barnes and Noble in Austin, Texas, in the Research Boulevard, and that is Saturday, November 22nd, and that is at 2 p.m. local time. So yeah, definitely check it out if you are in that area, but do not worry, anybody who's not in Texas or not in America, because we are going to bring you an interview with Brandon hopefully this next week, talking all about the book. Jace, that brings an end to sort of all of our usual talking topics. Have you been buying any Star Wars merchandise lately?
I haven't bought any Star Wars merchandise. I have entered a little raffle that I'm just trying to. I suddenly remembered to mention this, but I'm not sure if it's actually closed. But Padawan Outposts, who we've talked about before on the show, and who I've purchased some lightsabers from, they've got a habit at the moment. They've been doing some rather fun raffles where they've had signed lightsabers from different actors. I think they had a Hayden Christensen one, and Manny did one, I believe. So they've done some really cool lightsaber, raffles for that. But the one they've got at the moment that caught my eye is the Graflex collection, and it's the chance to actually win 5 lightsabers. And I don't know when this is going to go out, this episode, probably tonight, so Sunday. So the closing date is actually going to be, by the looks of it, midnight on Monday, which is the 17th. So you've got just over 24 hours to go. But I think it's £5 to enter, and you've got the chance of winning 5 different lightsabers, all different Graflex ones. So you've got like Anakin's, Obi-Wan's, all of these different sabers from the original sort of trilogy and the prequels. But it's something just to give people the heads up to have a look at, because Padawan Outpost do quite often put these little raffles up, and it's a good way of trying to possibly get yourself a lightsaber, but in particular a really special one. The other purchase or requirement I've got that's some, it's not Star Wars, but it'll probably be printing some Star Wars stuff, is I have got myself a 3D printer. So that's to hopefully help me with my Mando Mercs project. And obviously I've got, in 2 weeks' time, I will be on my way back, having done my first Comic-Con as a handler with the Mando Mercs up at MCM Birmingham. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm up there on the Saturday. So if anyone happens to be at MCM Birmingham and sees Hondo wandering around with the Mandos, please come and say hello.
awesome stuff. 2 weeks ago, I was in Disneyland Paris, so I did make a couple of Star Wars purchases. Whenever I'm there, I always have to go past the droid factory. This is where you can build your own 3.75-inch astromech droid. So I did build an astromech droid. I went with a purple body. I went with a black and gold legs, a black and gold head, a black front wheel, and then I also went with a pair of Mickey ears for his hat that have the Jedi Order logo on. I've just posted a TikTok video showing this figure, so you can definitely check it out. And in that video, I also have next to the droid I built last time I was there, which was this time last year as well. I always love building the droids there. They're usually pretty fun. They change the accessories sometimes, but yeah, a lot of fun. And then purchase I didn't make. I told myself the past 2 times I've been there, they do this awesome. It's a Star Wars Hyperspace Mountain. So basically, Space Mountain in Disneyland Paris is sort of semi-permanent. The Star Wars Hyperspace Mountain has been out for a while. There's no plans to take it away, so they have sort of merchandise for that ride there. Past 2 times I've been, I was going to get this jacket, but now I did. Went out this year. I didn't take a raincoat with it this year because I thought, if it rains, I'll grab it. But it never actually rained. The weather was sort of okay, so I never pulled the trigger on it, sadly. But there's always next time, I suppose. But yeah, that brings an end to sort of my Star Wars purchases over the past week or so. Jason, any final messages, and where can people find you on socials?
No, just keep enjoying Star Wars and keep dropping us messages about what's going on in your Star Wars world. And as always, it's at Ondo Ling.
You can find me on Twitter, now known as X, and on Instagram at Geordie Jedi Pete. You can find the podcast everywhere, including X, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. All those descriptions are, all the links to those pages are in the episode description, as well as a link to our Patreon as well, where you can support the show. So if you're interested in doing that, you can do that there as well. Thank you for listening. May the Force be with you all. And remember, always tell that to Kanja Club.